Hola, I'm Andrea Rivera de Vega, and this is Adelante Pronto, a Milwaukee PBS podcast. Today in Adelante Pronto, we're honored to talk with George Banda, a Latino Vietnam veteran, who will share with us some of his memories and what Veterans Day means to him and his family. George Banda was born in a very small town in Texas. His parents moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin when he was just 5 years old. Soon after graduation, he was drafted and served in the U.S. Army. In December of 1969, he arrived in the Republic of Vietnam and joined the elite Screaming Eagles 101st Airborne Division as a combat medic. As a member of 101st Airborne Division, George was awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and 9 additional military awards and commendations. His most profound award was not given to him by the military, but instead by the men he served with and gave medical attention to so they could live another day. George returned to Milwaukee only to deal with one of the hardest battles he would ever have, making it out alive when so many of his friends didn't, and learning to cope with the PTSD he suffered from. George and his wife Lorraine called Milwaukee home. After finding his bearings, George continued his life of service as a firefighter for Milwaukee. With his fellow veterans always close to his heart, George has been a part of 11 different veterans organizations and has also been a part of a committee or board for 10 organizations. While serving his community, George has received 14 civil recognitions. George continues his work as an advocate for all veterans. Mr. Banda, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here with me today, and also I would like to thank you for your service. As a member of the armed forces during the Vietnam War, you dealt with many difficult situations and traumatic events, some of which has led to your work when you came back. I'd like to go back to tell the story from your point of view. In this first question, many families have a history of service. Are you the first in your family, or were there others?
In my family, I was the first, though I have to say that my uncles, my dad's brothers, served in World War II, but that was a different time. Everybody was serving back then. So my uncles did serve, and my cousins, but in my direct family, I was the first and only one that served in the military.
The draft was a very scary thing for many young men. After you were drafted, did you ever consider becoming a draft dodger or moving to Canada?
Never. I was brought up to have a responsibility to not only yourself, but for your country. There was a duty that I was taught from early on that we are citizens of this United States, and that when the time came that you were to serve your country, it was an unspoken rule that you were going to be served to go into the military. So there was no thought in my mind whatsoever about being a draft dodger or going to Canada. I had heard about them, but that was not part of who I was.
Can you tell me about your very first thought or emotion when you stepped out of that airplane and your first boot hit the ground in Vietnam?
Well, getting off the plane into Vietnam and stepping on the ground there, the first thing that crossed my mind or my senses was the overpowering odor. It was pungent. It was so overwhelming that my senses were just going haywire because I couldn't figure out what that smell was. It was so strong, and I'll never forget that. And it was hot, obviously, and humid, which compounded that smell. And to this day, all 50 years later, I can still, every so often, catch a whiff or just a memory of it, and it takes me right back, and I'm like, oh, what is that smell? It was just something that in all my young years, I had never smelled anything like that. And there was also a cultural shock coming into the country. Everything was just so different. It was so real.
And as a medic, you spend most of your time during a firefight trying to keep your fellow soldiers alive. Is there anyone from your time in country that you treated and that you still keep in contact with?
Yes, I do. Yeah, in most cases, when someone was wounded and you treated them on the field, and they were then medevaced out by helicopter, usually you never saw them again. You didn't know what happened to them, if they lived or died. But there was a few that I did get a chance to reconnect with many years later, and now we get together every couple of years. We have a reunion of all those young men that I served with in Vietnam that I treated, and some that I didn't have to treat, but that they survived without being wounded. So we get together. In fact, I just got together with these older men now, like myself. We're all in our 70s in Mississippi in July. And so we get together with family, their wives, and or their friends. So it's a wonderful time to get together with these guys, and we talk about the things that we lived through, and from Vietnam to now, and all those changes that have happened through the course of our lives, and how fortunate we are to be together again.
Absolutely. And is there anything about the country of Vietnam or the Vietnamese people that stood out to you?
Interestingly, they were very kind, generous, happy people, which was really a shock to me, because the way I felt that they should be angry with us and not have us, didn't want us around, but it was just the opposite. And all the Vietnamese people that I had run into, and a lot of the Vietnamese children were happy, just like any children should be. In the middle of this war, they were going around about their business. You know, they were farmers, agricultural, and the children were out there playing their games and laughing and smiling. And again, very kind people that I still remember to this day fondly. And I know some Vietnamese here in Milwaukee, so we get together every so often, and I just love these people. Very, very wonderful people.
And when taking you back a little bit, when you came back, so when you were on the plane back to the United States, do you remember what you were thinking or how it felt?
It seemed surreal. I couldn't believe that I was actually on a plane heading back home to the United States. After going through 1 year of combat and seeing some horrible things and surviving that, it was just unbelievable that here I am with all these other young soldiers on an airplane with these beautiful, wonderful, kind stewardesses flying back to America, flying back home. And I remember looking out the window and seeing the ocean, the Pacific Ocean coming back, and I'm going, I just couldn't believe it. I thought maybe I was dreaming that I would wake up and find myself back in Vietnam, but no, here I was on a plane, and we were reading a magazine like you read now on a plane, and looking out the window and talking to each other, and we were all actually giddy. We were just so happy to have survived such an ordeal, and here we are going home.
Absolutely. And that was a time of turmoil in the United States, with many people speaking out against the war and taking it out on the servicemen. How did that affect you, George?
Arriving back in America at Fort Lewis, Washington is where I arrived from Vietnam. And one of the first things they told us there as we were processing is that if we were to go out into the civilian world, to the airport or anywhere, to remove our uniforms and not to wear them, and not to tell anyone that you were a Vietnam vet, because there was so much turmoil going around, which just shocked all of us. We knew there were things going on in the United States that were troubling, but we just had no idea what was really going on here. And that's what I did. I took my uniform off, got into my civilian clothes, and went about my business. I got back home, and the only people that knew that I was in Vietnam was obviously my family and my close friends. Anybody else did not have any idea, and I never spoke about it or told them about it. In fact, when they would ask me, "Hey, where have you been? We haven't seen you in a long time," and I would say, "Well, I was up north, with family." So, uh, and that's all where it would end that conversation. But for many years, decades, I never spoke about Vietnam. In fact, some of my cousins never even knew I was in Vietnam. They knew I was in the army, but never knew that I was in Vietnam until they saw something in the paper or heard about my experiences. That they would come up to me and say, "Hey, you were in Vietnam?" I said, "Yeah, I was." So yeah, it was so traumatic for most of us Vietnam vets that we just kind of went into hiding. We took our uniforms off and went back and blended in and never discussed it.
Was there a feeling of um, a numbing sense or of, I don't want to say shame, but like, because you came back and you were told don't share with anybody and kind of like blend. What was that feeling, George? How did that feel for you personally?
Yeah, it wasn't a good feeling. It wasn't, because you wanted to talk to people about your experiences, and you were shut down. And you could see around, when I attended UW Milwaukee, there were students around there that were demonstrating, and you could see almost the hatred that they had for Vietnam and Vietnam veterans. That you were, you almost felt ashamed that you were in Vietnam and that you were a soldier, and that's how they made you feel. And it was a horrible feeling to hide that fact that you were a veteran and you were doing your duty and your service and responsibility, and everybody thought that what you were doing was wrong, and that you were considered a baby killer, and and I couldn't understand it, and but I could see around me almost they despised us, and it was a horrible time. And until later, when we started to come out and say, "Hey, I was there, and so what? I did my duty."
You, George, had trouble assimilating back into civilian life like so many other veterans do. Can you briefly describe what were your biggest difficulties?
Well, the number one factor of the difficulty of coming back and feeling with the survival guilt that I had, and also the fact that I couldn't talk to anybody about how I was feeling because we had to hide the fact that we were Vietnam veterans, and there was no place to go. So uh, that survival guilt just ate at me to where the only way I could numb it was through alcohol, which was my uh, choice of drug. It was alcohol. And the only thing that alcohol did was numb it, but it also caused other problems. But that survival guilt was just overwhelming for me emotionally. As a combat medic, I was there to protect my men and make sure that they got home safely. And there was a lot of times I could not do that. And I felt guilty about that. And the fact that I had survived through all that combat, and here I am. And I used to think to myself, why are you so special that you made it through? You should have. There was other people there that wives, fiancés, families that didn't make it, and here I am, a single guy, and made it back. I was wounded, but here I am, alive, and I didn't feel the right to be alive and be enjoying my life the way it was. So I went to alcohol for that numbness, and it was terrible. But I finally made a breakthrough and got out of that funk that I was in.
And since that time, we've come to understand how much PTSD can affect our veterans, including yourself, George, mental health, alcohol, drugs, homelessness, and suicide, to mention a few. Can you tell me, what do you think is working and where we still need to improve?
What is working about reaching out to veterans who have, depression and PTSD and alcohol abuse is to more outreach to these veterans, to identify these veterans that are out there, and to convince them that there is help, and that's help that is working. It's working by reaching out to veterans, also by word of mouth. And one of the things that I do is when I go out and speak is to tell people, hey, you see me okay now, but I wasn't always this way. I had my issues, and I reached out, and somebody reached out to me also and said, hey, you need help. And it was a breakthrough. And what does help, and what helped for me and a lot of other veterans, and what is working is the getting together in group sessions with other veterans that feel the same way or went through the same experiences. That helps tremendously to be in a group like that. One-on-one also works, but not as well as being in a group session with other Vietnam vets or other veterans, talking about what you're feeling, and you find out that you're not alone, that everybody's feeling the same way. And then you share your experiences and what's helping you, and they share what's helping them, and then you all figure it out how to help yourself. So the outreaching and the group sessions are just tremendous.
And that's fantastic to hear that there is outreach, and then there is some way of coping with these situations. You work with for veterans is something that is important to you, George. What struggles are distinct for our Latino veterans in particular?
Interestingly, the same struggles. The guilt, the survival guilt, the depression, the alcohol. With Latinos is the pride that they have and the machismo that they have. They don't want to say that they're weak, that there's something wrong with them. They want to just carry on like there's nothing wrong, which causes a lot more problems because it doesn't go away if you deny it. It just festers inside you, which causes more problems, abuse, issues. So it's that pride and that machismo, and there's nothing wrong with me. I can take care of it myself. I don't need anyone. And we need to break through that to get to these Latino veterans, and which is what we do with the American GI Forum, which is a Latino veterans group here in Milwaukee, is to reach out to Latino vets, and then we get together and discuss these things. And and you realize they're going through the same thing: the depression, the guilt, and some of the abuse of alcohol and drugs. So it's just trying to get to them to let their guard down and say, hey, you know what, you're right, I have a problem, and I have to admit it. But people don't want to be how would I say, the stigma of having a mental issue is pretty strong among all of us. So we don't want to go for help. All of a sudden you say, well, he's got a problem, but we all have that problem, and we all need to help each other.
And anything that the community can do to support our veterans, and in particular the Latino community support our Latino veterans?
Again, is the reach out to Latino veterans. I know with UMOS and with Mexican Fiesta and the other Latino groups around the city, we have veterans in those organizations that help those organizations understand what a veteran is and what a veteran is going through. And we do a lot of reach out with those organizations. And
our last question: many people don't think about veterans on a daily basis the way you and most veterans and their families do. So on Veterans Day, when people are looking at their calendars and it pops up, can you tell us what it means to you and what you would like others to consider?
What Veterans Day means to me, and I think what should mean to everybody, is freedom. The freedoms that we have are not free, and we take them for granted. And you know what? I do too. But I always remind myself, and I remind others, especially civilians, that the way of life that we have, and it's a wonderful way of life here, is that somebody paid a dear price for it. All gave some gave all. And we should try to remember that whenever there's a Veterans Day or Memorial Day, every day is to thank veterans for the freedoms that we have and the way of life that we have, the liberties that we have here in this country. Is to remind them and for them to remind themselves, hey, thank you, veterans, for what we have.
It's been an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to interview you today. Thank you for sharing such an inspirational story, which is a testimony and a legacy to our country, and in particular, to our Latino generations. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.